Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jay. If I've not met you, thanks for coming to be with us. Labor Day weekend. What you've told me by being here today is that you are the smart people. The dumb people are fighting all the traffic right now, aren't they? It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad in the mountains, but you're the smart people. There are a few of you, it turns out, but you are the smart people. I was looking at the traffic. I just do this to comfort myself on Labor Day weekend, and it was bad. It was bad so congratulations, you're smart. We finished a series last week. We're going to start a new series next week that will really focus on what does it look like for us to be hospitable, warm, and welcoming to those who don't have life with God or maybe are skeptical about a life with God. So we're going to start that next week. This week we have a one-off to do today, and I came up with this snappy title, No One is Left Out. This is my way of telling you what you already know is true if you've been in church before, which is there are Sundays that you come and you listen to a talk or you're a part of what's going on and it doesn't relate to you. Have you ever had that experience? Don't be too excited about it. Some of you are like, all the time, like pretty much every time you talk. But there are talks that don't relate to you. You can tell it's for somebody else. It's talking to married people when you're single, or it's talking about parenting and you don't have any kids, or it's talking about just something else, something that just doesn't relate to you. And you're like, wow, I'm so glad this is helpful for other people. But I can guarantee that today's talk will relate to every single person in this room. I can guarantee it. So that's exciting. So you came to hear something that will help you. Now, the bad news is it happens to be the thing that people don't like to hear about, which is about money. Has anyone here ever had stress about money? Okay. The next part, maybe next week the sermon will be about lying, because very few people responded. And if you're the kind of person that's never had trouble with money, you're a liar, because you have. There's always something that you want that you don't have. There's always something that shorter. There's billions of dollars arrayed against all of us to try to get us to buy more stuff, to do more things, to feel like you're inadequate in some kind of way. I pretty much every single day have some kind of advertisement that comes toward me that tells me, have no fear, all of your money is going to be solved right now. Anybody ever get those? Some kind of advertisement about Bitcoin, or have no fear. I mean, isn't it amazing how many people just give you free money? Isn't that incredible? Like 0% interest. There's some of you like, I know, I love that. It's a trick. It's a trick. Because none of that's real. There's all kinds of ways to manipulate how we think and how we feel about money. And those of you who've read the Bible should not be surprised that the Bible talks a lot about money, like a lot. More than most people expect. One of the things, as I'm helping people start to read the scriptures who've never read the Bible before, they're usually surprised by a couple of things. One is how much of the Bible is story. They're always surprised by that, like, oh, it's not a bunch of lists. They're always surprised about how suspicious, specifically Jesus is, of religious people. That always surprises people about the Bible. And then usually they're pretty surprised at how much the Bible talks about money, because your money does reveal your heart. It reveals where your confidence lies. Your calendar and your budget tell you a lot about you. They tell you a lot about what you value, what you prioritize, and what you're going to give your hope to. And I know that, there's always the sense that you don't have enough. That wouldn't it be great to be rich? Anyone here rich? Any rich people here? Nobody did anything. Okay, so apparently there's somewhere else, but because I don't know, we all want to be rich. Well, imagine a day that we would be rich. You might not know this. I looked up the most recent statistics. If you have more, it's all the way up to $42,000 in household income. If you have more than $42,000 of household income, you're in the top 2% of income earners in the world. Isn't that cool? So that means if you're in the room right now and you make more than $42,000 a year, you're rich. One person went, woohoo. Now, there are some of you that are like, man, I dream of the day I'd make $42,000 in household income. But there's many of you that are like, oh, that's not that much money. I make way more money than that. And so I come to tell you today, you are rich. Congratulations. And you happen to live in the wealthiest nation in all of human history. Like, there are kings from only like 100 years ago that could not imagine what you have at your fingertips. Like, they could not have imagined having, like, first of all, just like water indoors. They could not have imagined hot water at access, or roads, chariots, no less, that can carry you across a city within minutes. Never could have imagined these things. You have an incredible amount of wealth, and you are rich. Now, as I'm saying this, most of you are like, I don't like this sermon. And you don't like this sermon because you don't feel rich. Because there's a big difference between being rich and feeling rich. And statistic after statistic tells us this, that at every income bracket, every person believes that there is another amount of money that would actually satisfy their needs. No matter how much money you have, you're imagining another income bracket that would actually satisfy your needs. And it just never ends. No matter how much money you have, you always want a little bit more money. The majority of adults in this room probably have more money than you did even 5 or 10 years ago. There's a percentage of people in this room that you couldn't have imagined you would have as much you have now, and yet you still imagine another day where you would have more money, because being rich is not about how much you have, but here's the key, about how much margin you have and how generous you can actually be. How generous are you with what you have tends to indicate the degree to which you feel content with what you have. That's usually what happens. I mean, I don't know about you, the time you felt the most rich, I can remember the exact moment I felt the most rich. It was when I got my first paycheck as a bagger at Kroger. I was 15 years old. I got this paycheck. I think it was like $87. And I remember being like, this is limitless money. I can remember exactly how it felt. I can feel it. Like right now when I think about it, I remember cashing it just like straight up. I'll take all 87 right now. And I rode my bike to the little candy store, and I got candy, and I got little whistles for me and all my friends. You know, they were a dime, you know, and they go, whee! Remember those little whistles? And me and my friends rode our bikes around, eating candy, blowing our whistles. And I remember feeling like, could it ever be better than this? This is the height of wealth. And honestly, here I am now. I wonder if maybe that was the richest I've ever been. Because there's a difference between being rich and feeling rich. And the difference between being rich and feeling rich is, do you have margin and are you generous? Generosity changes things. And believing that what has been given to you is a stewardship, that it's really up to you. And learning how to use that in such a way that you feel like your money has purpose and what's been entrusted to you as a steward is meaningful. The words of Jesus, which we read a moment ago, give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. As a pastor, my job is to try to empower, equip people to live a life following Jesus and to grow in all the different ways that we experience the grace of God, to know his love in every area of your life. That is my job, to teach that way. We try to create context where we grow in our life together and express that love and that life to the watching world. In this, part of the job of a church is to grow in the grace of giving, to learn how to become better stewards and more generous. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 7, Paul says this: just as you excel in everything, in faith and speech and knowledge, in complete earnestness, in your love for us, here it is, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. Part of spiritual maturity is not just growing in your prayer life, is not just growing in your understanding of the scriptures. Part of spiritual maturity is growing in the grace of giving, learning how to be a better steward of your finances and what's been entrusted to you, and learning how to become more generous. So, to that end, I can guarantee, I'm going to say a few things very, very quickly. I can guarantee this will help every single person because I'm about to cut the entire room up into 4 categories. You will be in one of these 4 categories. It is a guarantee. One of these 4 categories will be you. You should listen closely to your category when I talk about you. And you should listen even more closely to the next category because that will offer you an opportunity to grow in grace, to grow in generosity. Now, you don't have to be a follower of Jesus for this to be helpful to you. Some of you might have brought guests and you're like, this sucks. This is a week I brought them. But you don't have to be a follower of Jesus. This will really serve you nonetheless, because the things I'm talking about are basic principles. But if you are a follower of Jesus, all the more. Because these are truths that are taught from the scriptures for people who are following Jesus, but they're still useful for anybody, even if you're not a follower of Jesus. So, I'm going to do 4 groups. Here they are. I'm going to go very, very fast. Number 1, first group is those that don't give at all. You just don't give. You don't give money away. You don't give generously. And that can be because you feel like you don't have enough. You can feel like, oh, I'm in a strange window where I'm not able to be generous. I just don't give money. I don't give money to nonprofits. I don't give money to a church. I don't give at all. There's been a huge study that was done out of Notre Dame, a sociologist named Christian Smith. When Christian Smith looked at the generosity patterns of Americans, he determined there was about 1/5 of all people who say they follow Jesus that aren't generous at all. 1/5. And by the way, that number goes way up if you're not a follower of Jesus. I mean, it turns out in America, the most generous people are people that love and follow Jesus. It's just facts. You don't have to like that if you don't follow Jesus. It's just true. And so Christian Smith says, okay, it's about 1/5 of people who love and follow Jesus. I don't know if that would be true in our room today, but if that's you, you should think about that. And this phenomenon, according to Smith, and I think honestly just pastorally looking at people, is that these are people that feel like they're in a unique circumstance, that whatever's being given to them, they're not able to give it away. In other words, stewardship would tell them they have to hold on to everything. And what that means conversely is that they're imagining a world where when they have more, they could be a different kind of person. I mean, who here doesn't say, if I could just win the lottery, I would be so generous? Right? I mean, if I just had $1 million, Jay, you'd be amazed. It's usually when someone sings, if I had $1 million. But that's for old people. If I just have more money, I would be more generous. And here's just the facts psychologically. It's just not true. It's just not true. Because whatever you have, you will find a way to spend in the way you're spending it now. You just will. Generosity is a spiritual and heart problem. The scriptures say this over and over again. The writer of Ecclesiastes says it just like this. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? It was a number of years ago, you may or may not remember this, but there was a teen that killed 4 people as a drunk driver. It was national news. It became national news because the main case of the defense attorney was that this teen was not responsible for the deaths of these people because the teen suffered from a psychological condition that he had deemed affluenza. Does anyone remember this? It was national news. An affluenza was a disease that he had because he had been so entitled and given so much that he'd lost the capacity to tell the difference between right and wrong because he'd been so entitled. And I know you'll be shocked to hear this. It didn't work. It was a failed defense. But it was a fascinating defense because the defense put forward experts and said, this is just true, that your neurology, your brain patterns, your own desires, your own sense of being satiated is affected directly by how you have been given money or have privilege in your life in such a way that this teen, the argument was, their capacity for consequential thinking had been changed, and therefore they should not be responsible. Now, though it was not an adequate defense for murder, I think it is fairly accurate in relationship to how our brains actually do work. We in America do suffer from a form of affluenza. We suffer from the sense that we don't have enough, when actually the statistics are really clear that Americans have been given incredible amounts of resources. And yet, in the wealthiest nation in all of human history, we still can't find a way to be generous. And worse than that, we can't find a way to be generous even as followers of Jesus, when the scriptures are shockingly clear to that end. We always think if we can just save a little more, we can make a little more. But the problem is that's not how it works. People who bump into a life with Jesus all throughout the scriptures suddenly become generous because they become aware of what's been given to them. I could look at a million scriptures right now, but Zacchaeus, and a wee little man was he. If you remember that. And okay, just church kids got that one. But Zacchaeus, who's the tax collector, who's straining to see Jesus. The minute Jesus grabs a hold of him, he says, I'm just going to give everything. Anything I've ever wrote, I'll give it away. What it means to come into a life with God is to realize that God gave everything for you. And so you have to figure out how to be generous. And if you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, hear me really, really clearly. You're never going to perform in such a way that you're going to feel content in your own moral strength. This thing of following Jesus, it's not a self-improvement plan. This thing of following Jesus, what we find in the scriptures and what we find in a life with God is that God has done everything for us in Christ. The way that life begins to change is when we receive the grace that's offered in Jesus. And as we receive his life, we can grow to become more like him. Followers of Jesus are people that realize this isn't about me anymore. It's about what Christ has done for me. And so the most natural outflow of an encounter with the living God is generosity. We figure out how to give away out of what's been given to us to break the power of greed. Listen to me. More money will not break the power of greed in your life. It just won't. The only way to begin to break the power of greed in your life is to learn how to live within limits, to have margin, and to learn how to be generous. Second category, which flows neatly from that one, would be not just those who don't give, but those who give intermittently. If we were the kind of church that passes a basket, have you ever been in that church? They pass the basket around. We've done that before. It's difficult logistically. So we have boxes and we have tech now that you can use to give. But this is the people that when you pass the basket, you dig around in your pockets and you're like, I have like an old piece of gum, 2 pieces of lint in a quarter, and I'll just like, there you go. So that it's like you give. I visited a church in Florida, and somebody had given them a shotgun in the offering. Anyway, begs a ton of questions. Like A, do you have a shotgun in church? B, that's what you're going to get. Anyway, okay, so doesn't matter. But it's just like I'm just going to give, just kind of intermittently. I just give sort of randomly. Or I'm going to give based on something that kind of pulls my heart, right? So I'm going to give because I heard about a story of something happening in Africa or in Haiti. It's episodic. I'm just going to try to give. And listen, I don't want to be too hard on folks here. If you've never given at all, to give in this way is a huge sacrifice. It's a big shift. And so for those of you who's like, man, I've never given, just hear me right now. Starting to get in the habit or the practice of giving is really hard. It's a big shift. It's a big change. And to give it all feels really brave. And this is the category that Christian Smith, we find the most Christians in. His work was really interesting. Notre Dame was interesting. And he has a quote from one person who says, I give like Jesus said. Jesus said we're to give as we feel led. That's what somebody said. Does anyone know what verse that is? Doesn't exist. That's not an actual verse. That actually just doesn't exist because that's not true. It's not true that you're to give as you feel led. You're to give out of obedience in what it means to be a follower of Jesus, and you're to give in an intentional, systematic way, not just randomly. This is all over the scriptures, but here's one interesting case of 1 Corinthians. Now, about the collection for the Lord's people, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up, so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Paul says you should give in a systematic way. You should give in an intentional way. You should give in a way that every paycheck, a certain amount comes out, and you're just going to set it aside so that when I show up to receive this, you're just going to give it. And this would be the third group, which is a systematic way of giving that is taught in the scriptures directly. And that third group would be those who tithe. The word tithe literally means 10%. So that means whatever, for those of you not mathematicians, if you have a number, how do you get to 10% of that number? How do you do that? Yeah, there's an accountant among us, and she says, listen, here's what you do. You take the number and you move the decimal point 1 over, and guess what that is? That's 10%. Some of you are like, this is so useful. This is such helpful information. Again, I studied philosophy, so numbers are entities that have meaning, but you got to get out of that mode at some point and say tithe is literally 10%. And the scriptures are really, really clear that you're to give the first 10% back to God. This runs all the way through the scriptures. Leviticus 27, a tithe of everything from the land, whether grain or soil or fruit of the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. Tithe runs all the way through the teaching of the scriptures. And there are some scriptures that make a really strong case about what it means if you don't tithe as at least a standard for giving. Malachi chapter 3 is the one that is referenced the most, so I'll read it to you. Will a mere mortal rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how are we robbing you? in tithes and offerings. You're under a curse, your whole nation, because you're robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. To my knowledge, and maybe somebody's a better Bible scholar than me in the room, there is no place in all of the Bible that you are told to test God. Actually, there are many places in the Bible you're told not to test God. Do not test God. Do not test the Lord. This is one passage in all of the Bible that God says, test me in this. See what happens if you give a tenth, the first tenth, to me. See what happens. And what's implied from the passage, and what I would make a case for, is that that is a local congregation where you learn from God. You receive from God himself. That is a local church. You give a tenth of your income to the local church. That's the tithe. The scriptures also talk about offering. And offerings are then what's above that. And this might seem crazy to you. Some of you have not been in church. You're like, a tenth of my income? I don't have that. I don't have that in my budget. Well, you're right. It isn't in your budget. It's the first tenth. So you live, God is so generous. He says, you can live off 90%. But I want the first tenth. I remember for my wife and I, because, we've struggled, especially when we were planting this church. We had so little money personally. We put all our money into it. I was like, we don't have any money. I remember taking my youngest daughter to McDonald's. I think she was 4. And I was praying about this at the time, like, Lord, how do we give and how do we get people to give? I took my youngest daughter to McDonald's. And we're at McDonald's, and I'd finished my French fries, and she had not finished hers. And I was like, hey, can I just have one of your French fries? And she's like, 3. And then she looks at me. She pulls them closer to her and stares at me like, who do you think you are? 3-year-old, full of sin. Not taught her that, but she was instantly like, And I remember I had a whole bunch of things come to mind instantly when she did this. The first was what she didn't realize is, those are actually my fries. I bought those. You don't know this. I pay for those. I would like one. I just want one. She didn't realize that's something she's not thinking about. Number 2, that she didn't think about is, I don't have to actually ask you. I could just take that. I'm bigger, I'm stronger. No one would stop me. If I want that fry, I'm just going to have it, okay? I'm asking for it. Third that she didn't think about is, I own all her future fries. And so when I ask for a fry, if you would like any more in the future, you might want to give me that one now. And then fourth, I could buy as many fries as I want. I don't need her fry. The truth is, I was living in a McDonald's commercial. I wanted a moment with my 3-year-old, and she's like, you will not have this moment. Can I just tell you, this is what it is when God's asking you to give? There's nothing you have that isn't his. There's nothing you have that he doesn't own. There's nothing you have that he couldn't just take if he wanted it. There's nothing you have that isn't dependent on him giving it to you more in the future. And honestly, when God is asking you to be generous, he's asking for a connection with you. You demonstrate that you trust the Lord and you believe it's all from him when you live generously. Do you honestly feel like I can't give back to the Lord what he clearly commands? I don't have adequate time to make this case, but many people come back and say, well, is tithing even in the Bible? It's an Old Testament principle. Here's all I want to say. If the people of God who did not have the grace of Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit were giving 10%, how much more should people who know the grace of Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, how much should they give? 10% should be the minimum for a follower of Jesus. The minimum. It is not the ceiling, it is the floor. Now, let me just say it like this. Here's my challenge to you. If you've not ever given a tithe, can I just give you a challenge? Here's a thought. I'm going to call it the 1% challenge. Here's what I want you to consider. Try to give 1% of your income every month Just start somewhere and then lead that up to get to 10 months. Christian Smith's argument, as he looked at the research on this, is that the Church of Jesus Christ in America is about $133 billion short because believers don't tithe. $133 billion for the church to serve the poor, to care for refugees, to do the things we're called to do. $133 billion short. And you've only got your part. You've got your part, but I would want to challenge you, especially if you say you're a part of the life of this church, start somewhere and watch what God does incrementally as you learn to be generous. So last category, and I'll do it quickly because I want to be done. And you guys look like you want me to be done. The fourth group is those where the tithe is the floor, not the ceiling. There are some of you in this room, and I just want to say this as clearly as I can, that are really, really, really generous. And you're generous not just because you have a lot of money. You're generous because you're just generous. I'm not doing this talk because we're like running out of money. I'm not doing this talk because we're going to start selling chairs or something. I'm doing this talk because I think it's important for me as a pastor to do this. And we are a really generous church. We give a lot of money away to be a part of what God is doing in this city and around the world. This is not some desperate plea. This is about discipleship and learning to be the kind of people that God has called us to be. And there's some of you in this room that you're really generous, or God would call you to grow in this grace of generosity. Let me just speak. This is going to be a few people, but let me say this really clearly. There's some of you that have the ability to make a lot of money. Like you've just been gifted to do it. I would just pray that God would give you the gift of generosity. From time to time, I get to disciple and be with people who make a lot of money, like a lot of money. And I've already made the case that we're all rich, but they're like the rich of the rich, right? And whenever I'm with them, I'm reminded of this passage in 1 Timothy chapter 6. Paul writes this to Timothy: "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so they may take hold of a life that is truly life." If you have the ability to make a lot of money, can I just say this really clearly? Make a lot of money. Make as much as you possibly can and give it away. You are not spiritual to not make money. Make as much as you possibly can and learn to be really generous. The challenge I give to people that can make a lot of money is what's enough? I've got about maybe 25 people that I say, just name the number that is the number you need, and then you'll give the rest away. It's an interesting exercise. Some of you are like, the number I need, I'll take anything. No, I mean, so I'm not talking to you right now. I'm talking to the people, what is the ceiling of what you need? And then just say, I'll give the rest away for the rest of my life. And this little challenge can change your life, especially if you have the capacity to make a lot of money. Learn to be generous at whatever level you're at. Okay, so if you're in the first two groups, I'm asking you to take the 1% challenge. Start with 1% and give faithfully. If you're in the tithing group, would you consider, what's it look like for me to be generous over and above? What's it mean for me to learn to have tithing be the floor, not the ceiling? And if you're the person that's already giving over and above, go make more money so that you can give more away. Be brave, because only a few, there's a few people that have the gift of generating wealth and learning to be generous. Amen? So I got all of you. Everyone got included in that category? Everybody know which category they're in. Raise your hand if you know which category you're in. Everybody know? You don't know? You're not sure? I can just do a personal session with you. Just bring your bank statement. We can talk about it. Okay. So everyone knows, and you all know what it would look like to take the next step. Okay, why don't we stand together?